Hi, and thank you so much for allowing us to do this webinar today to share key points and features of our platform, Exa. And Ron Otis is here with me. And you want to say anything, Ron?
No, I just want to thank the Hospital Council for letting us do this presentation and bring some value add to hopefully to all you out there in the healthcare world. Shay and her team has been doing a lot. There's a lot of new ideas and new formats that really are innovative, and I'm glad that we're able to present it.
Yeah, thank you guys. We really do appreciate y'all letting us be here. Andrew, we call him Andy Horning, is our Exa product manager, and he is going to share those features at a high level, and then at the end of the webinar, we would love to take your questions, and feel free to contact any of us if there are questions about our platform, Exa. And we'll let Andy take it from here.
Great, thanks. Well, I'm going to just launch right in with some slides first, and I'm going to show you all of the stuff I'm going to be describing in the slides. So don't worry too much about taking notes just yet. But the short answer here is that Exa is an integrated platform on a single database that has an awful lot of possibilities and modules that we add on top. Now, I'm emphasizing that single database because that allows us to do an awful lot of things that I'll show you later that nobody else can do. So what Exa actually is a platform. We don't like to think of it as just a PACS. It is a platform upon which we can do other functions. And those functions can be all described in just a little bit. The viewing options that we offer are also pretty exceptional, not just because we can do things like 3D mammo and echo, stress echo, and all of the other modalities that you would expect, but because we can do it from anywhere on any kind of device, just about. And also we have a lot of reporting and documentation options that I'll get into later. So here's what's really more or less exceptional about what we're offering. There are a lot of people that have, PACS, a lot of people have RIS, a lot of people have, some of these things in isolation. But we're really the only, still, so far, we are the only company to provide a true zero footprint viewing, which it's fully diagnostic as far as the FDA is concerned. We have server-side rendering, which is actually much more important than that zero footprint. Zero footprint means you just don't have to download anything in order to see images. You could just log into, you take a username and password and you go to a shortcut link and you can do all of your work. But the server-side rendering I'll demonstrate later. This is where we get our speed and our capability in doing things without downloading anything, including no compromise image performance, measurements. And then there's security that goes along with that server-side rendering. Since you're not actually moving the DICOM file stays on the server with server-side rendering, and we're basically just moving pixels to your local box. All of the decompression, the rendering, the image analysis is done on the server, and then we display fully diagnostic images with all of the tools to go along with that. But you're not moving the DICOM file, you're not moving the patient information. So in regulatory terms, there's nothing at motion, nothing at rest. And for security, you can't beat that. Then the other thing, I mentioned it before, but I'm going to probably say this many times because it's fairly important. This is all on a single integrated database. So where other systems have different databases and different sections of their system for different functions, we have integrated all of our functions onto a single database, and that allows us to do a lot of things with the data that nobody else can do also. And I'll show you that later. If you put all of those things together, what that means is that we can improve your workflow and your quality. And this is where, I wanted to highlight this one story here, where one provider increased their productivity by 400%. And, I have some of the details written down here that they could read 2.5 times the number of cases. They reduced report turnaround times by more than 50%. Reading times were cut from 4 or 5 minutes down to just 1. Now, to be clear, this particular site had a PACS before, but that was more or less the old technology. And what we offered them with Exa is all the improvements that I'm going to demonstrate later. And that's just the kind of things that, with the flexibility that we offer in terms of access, simplicity in terms of user experience, we can do much more with less is the bottom line in it. And some of that is because of I will show you this in detail. I wanted to give you an idea what we have a workflow engine that is, nobody else has anything like it. There are some dedicated workflow systems that you can add on top of other software packages that can do some of this kind of organization of workflow, but we're the only platform that all in the same database has, and in fact the only PACS at all, that has the capability of customizing workflows, several different workflows for several different sites, all in the same database. And I'll show you this later because I think that's going to become important when you're talking about different institutions might have a different way of reporting. They might have different exam types that they need different insurance or other pre-verification for. We can automate and we can make simplified all those various workflows so people have lots of possibilities without having to see all of them on the same screen. So we can trim things down. We put a lot of complexity in the back end to make it real simple on the front end. And that comes down to our work list as well. This is just an example of what the work list will look like. You know, we can change colors and columns, and I'll show you some of that later. But you know, basically the bottom line is you log in with your user login, and you will see exactly and only what it is that you want to see. And what that means is that you're not just faster access to images, but faster access to everything. I will show you later that, you know, while we might talk about PACS pretty predominantly, depending on your workflow, you might not really be looking at images. I want to make clear at this point that everything I'm going to show you is available just through any wireless connection, or you know, if you've got internet on any device, you can do your IT support functions. You can look at log files. You can do a lot of, you know, everything that's necessary on a PACS, all with a zero footprint, no VPN, very secure SSL encrypted interface. And so the imaging piece is very important because we don't have to do any prefetching. We don't have to send the same study multiple places because we don't know where the doctor is going to be opening up a study and looking at it. None of that is required with server-side rendering. And then really what that means as far as, you know, if I'm saying that you don't have to send the same file many times, and if we're not sending the whole DICOM file, the average is about 65% bandwidth reduction. So in some cases where you have very complicated workflows, it actually can be more than that. And it's generally about a minimum of 50% bandwidth reduction when you start using Exa. And that's because we can simplify the workflow, and we're pushing less data around just with server-side rendering anyway. So we have, and this is without compromise. I want to emphasize that also. You're not giving up anything to have all of that functionality. So I'm just going to show you now what I've been talking about. This is the Exa, this is an example of an Exa work list. And just to give you an idea how quick and easy it is to change, you know, colors on the fly, or I can move columns around. This is a very flexible system in terms of user experience. So each user can have their own preference as far as what columns are shown, what buttons are shown. But sort of the workflow piece of that is that whatever your workflow is, we will put stat exams up right at the top, and they're going to be color-coded. We do the same thing with turnaround time. So you can see as studies are aging, they start rising up the list, and they can start flashing colors. And all of that is to draw attention to the fact that this is a workflow device. And the work list is where that rubber meets the road. And so when somebody logs in, they might see something different looking than this. They're going to have different shortcut buttons. Maybe they're only going to have a few studies that show it all. So if they just have if it's a physician logging in, they don't want to see all of this information, that orders and so on. So we can trim all of that away, and they see exactly and only the studies they need to see. and as they do their work, things disappear off their list. So this piece is important, but it really is just sort of the interface to the workflow engine. And I'm just going to very quickly show you how that works, because I think that's an important visual for what I'm going to show you after this. So this workflow engine, which we call our study status flow builder, is an extremely powerful set of tools that we use for both the implementation and actual use of the system. And while these squiggly lines and so on look complicated, I'll explain just in a minute how this really simplifies things. But the bottom line is we can have different workflows for, in this case, different facilities, or for different parts of your institution, different workflow needs. So there are some parts that might require actual human transcription. We might use our structured reporting. And you don't need to have all of the same right-click options or automated functions for different types. So what we do is by status, we also assign functions. And that can mean things like forced flows. If a physician doesn't read a study by a set, 3 hours, then it can drop off one physician's list and pop onto another, or it can send a message to somebody with an alert. We can send HL7 messages or text messages through this. So this is a very powerful system by which we can not just set up your workflow, but we can actually automate certain functions. We can make things bidirectional or unidirectional, where I can change the right-click options on the workflow, on your work list, to suit this workflow. And while that looks a little bit funny, I think you'll see as I'm going through the rest of this that can be extremely powerful. So that workflow engine is entirely unique to us. And then the next part is I'm going to open up a really large study, and we're happy to give people, I kind of have to say this right up front, where some people, when I double click on a study and they see how fast it loads, they think we're doing some kind of hocus pocus here. But I assure you we are not. And in fact, I'm going to load a 3D mammogram. And in fact, I'm going to load one that I know has several priors. And this is something that would ordinarily be scary for someone demonstrating a system to do through a wireless connection. But I'm actually working off a laptop computer, and I'm using a wireless connection. And we are happy to offer people a user login, and they can go to our demo database, and they can do exactly what I'm going to show you now. And that's just double click on something like a very large study, in this case a mammogram, which would ordinarily take minutes to load. And you'll see that, it's just seconds before you see images loaded, and they're all here. If I drag and drop this, this is the 3D mammogram, and you're going to see just a little bit of a lag because of the way I'm presenting this through GoToMeeting. But I think you can see all the slices are there. And as I scroll through this, you'll see that we're not losing anything in terms of resolution or speed compared to a full-on hospital system. And if I wanted to zoom in or do any of the imaging tools or window leveling, I'm not giving up on anything just by having the zero footprint and server-side rendered platform. It's absolutely no compromises whatsoever. So I don't have to download another client software in order to do simple measurements or in order to do image analysis. So if I wanted to do MPRs on CTs, we have all of those functions available through this platform. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that we also have instant availability to all the priors. So if I wanted to, I could show you, hanging protocols and so on, but without getting too much into the details of that, I want to point out how fast the priors load also. So I've got the priors loaded automatically. They're color-coded. I don't know if you can see on your screen, but they show in green or in purple or whatever that prior happens to be. And as I just click my buttons to go through the hanging protocol, the images just pop up instantly. And I just have to kind of emphasize that's extraordinary. Just the speed that we can offer, as long as you have a 5-megapixel monitor, we don't care where you are, where you're pulling the images from. We can match the speed of the fastest dedicated systems just through the internet, and you're not giving up anything. So that is just kind of in visual form, that is the biggest advantage of server-side rendering. I'm not moving the whole DICOM file. I'm only downloading what I have to get a diagnostic image, and that makes it much, much faster. And that's with all modalities. So if I was going to look at stress echo or an MRI, we have that kind of instant availability of the images. We also have, on this same platform, well, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we only have so much time to go into it. But we have other modules as well. I'm not going to show you the billing module, but we can discuss just quickly something like the schedule book, where this is kind of a natural addition to a PACS system. Even if you're using some other system for straight up scheduling or entering orders, we do have all of the data hooks necessary to do what we do with scheduling. And we do scheduling very well with filters, finding the next available slot, automated tools for scheduling patients. And that is all built into the same database, which allows us to do things like the dashboards. And when I'm talking about the single database system, I mentioned it a little bit before, but to sort of underscore the point, everything that happens in our system gets a tag that has the who did it, what they did, what time they did it, and all of that can be turned into some kind of a report. These dashboards are customizable, and they're customizable by user as well, so a physician wouldn't need to see all of this data. But this is the kind of thing that we can customize, the basically live SQL queries, so that you can look at workflow statistics, you can check stats, you can look at billing, you can look at target study volumes. All of these things can be customized by user. I can add or subtract these gadgets as I wish. I can change the way the data is displayed, so whether I want to have any kind of particular presentation of the data, or whether I want to have the certain time slice that is important to me. All of this can be changed on the fly, but I can also do reporting in the more conventional sense, where I can take all of that data and either do something like a custom query, where I have several parameters I can enter to create a report, or we have a number of pre-canned or configurable, customizable reports that can be exported in different ways. So what this is, in short, is a platform that's zero footprint that allows us to do all manner of the the functions you would expect from PACS, RIS, and many EHR functions. And it's all available even in terms of supporting the kind of data that you would need to look at for reprocessing HL7 messages. I can very quickly find individual HL7 messages. So I don't know if we have any other nerds listening in on this. I know I tend to be one. But for those who do the IT functions, for those who do the administrative functions, having the ability to do all of that from anywhere on the same zero footprint interface is pretty unique. That's an extremely powerful tool. And then, to wrap up sort of the basic functionality without getting too deep into it, I wanted to talk about the reporting options as well. We can, in the viewer itself, we can support the traditional style of reporting, where there is you record audio for a human transcriptionist to later read and then listen to and then put it into a template. And that's what this little recorder is showing here up at the top. So you could just take either a speech mic or just a simple microphone and speak, and that audio can be attached to the study for later transcription. We have very customizable templates by which you can do whatever sort of reporting you want, whether it's going to be Dragon integration, the speech recognition, whether you're going to be using something like customized templates that we can provide. So we can, we have several different ways of customizing templates for you with different header options and so on. So we can create and, in fact, these are user customizable. You don't have to call us to create templates with your own logo and such on top pre-populated with patient data. And we also offer, it's getting a little bit more commonly used, structured reporting. So for various kinds of reports where the options, you want to have something like a click-to-finish report, these are also user customizable, where I can go through and create a very quick and easy report that's auto-populated with data from the modality. So if you have complicated procedures with measurements that you want to have, pre-populate with the data from an ultrasound machine, for example, we can do that very quickly and easily. And that's, once again, that's user customizable. So that would be the basic workflow, where we've got the images, the data, and reporting all available from a very simple user interface. And that structured reporting, while I'm showing you here, this is an echo report. It doesn't have to be. This can be a vascular report, it can be stress echo report, it can be EKG report. We can do several different kinds, and these are all customizable. And we even can do things like configure an all normal button, so you can quickly auto-populate certain statements and then just report by exception, whatever is not normal. And so it's a very quick and easy way to generate a report. And all of those options are available on the same platform. So if we're looking at just the the usual workflow, reading images, QAing images, checking orders against them, all of that is built into the same database, and it works very fast and easy. And one other thing, before I think we can take a breath and kind of go over some details, is that everything that's in the system is available just from a click away. So if I'm looking at a study and I want to see attached documents, and we've been doing a lot of work with sites that work with the lawyers, for instance, and there might be many different kinds of exam documents that we can scan in. They can be uploaded from a digital file, or they can be custom forms that we create within our system. We have several sites now that have gone entirely paperless, even to the point of having patients sign in on something like a tablet, and they get patient instructions. They can get custom forms for, study prep notes, that kind of thing, all available through either by printing out when they're checking in, or through the patient portal, or other. We have several different means of faxing, printing, and automatically creating data that is just available a right click away. So I'm just going to take just a few minutes now, and then we're going to go back over just some of the basics of how the typical workflow goes. And then I think you're going to see, when I showed you that flow diagram at the beginning that has the status and the squiggly lines, that this really is an extremely powerful system, especially for those sites where you want to have a single place to store data from several different points of entry. So in other words, if I have several different facilities that I'm looking at, and if I have a workflow that I want to be able to get data from all of those sites, and yet I want to be able to separate out those sites so that perhaps you don't want some reading groups to see other reading groups' patients. Perhaps you want to be able to partition data by site for reporting purposes, or just for customizing the workflow and making things more efficient. I think you'll see that when we set up Exa as a single database platform, this is a model that I think everybody's going to have to go to eventually. And we were the first, and we're still the only one that has all of these functions. So when it comes to specific types of workflow, whether it's orthopedics or echocardiography, where we support all of the different modalities. We support the calculations by several means for nuclear studies and for offline calculations. Or for CT, just the bottom line that we can very quickly and with a very simple interface do all of the work that needs to be done faster, more efficiently, and in many cases much more inexpensively, just because of the efficiency that we're adding and the flexible architecture that we offer. So at this point, I think I'd like to just open it up for questions. If anybody has anything they'd like to ask. I know I offered up a lot of information there. Don't know if any questions? I see one question coming in. What is the main benefit you see typically for large hospitals? Well, that's actually a very good question, in so much as the larger the institution, typically the more extreme the benefits are of having that single database system. Now, we do have a lot of smaller sites, and even in those cases where it might be just a single office, having a single database is a big advantage. But larger hospitals are typically going to have all of the suite of needs, including things like scheduling and so on. At least the data hooks, whether it's by HL7 messaging or whether it's going to be directly through our interface, we need to collect a lot of data and make it available to a lot of people. Now, when I showed you this list before of things that are available just a click away, when it comes to all of this patient data, I probably should have explained that not everybody would see all of this. We can trim this down so that not everybody gets this whole list of options, nor is everybody going to be able to do everything in terms of changing data and so on. We're very restrictive about how we can slice and dice people's access to data. We can make it very easy to get data, or we can make it impossible for some people to get in and do things on the system. That's extremely important for large institutions with multiple sites in particular. And our multimodality support, including 3D mammography, other 3D modalities, and that's, of course, going to be necessary in larger institutions, as they're the ones who are typically going to have the more sophisticated needs, just by the number of people that are going through the hospital network, the number of physicians they're likely to have on the reading list. It's more likely that they're going to be using more of our capabilities. So large institutions, or even a reading, we have several reading groups. That the reading group itself might not be very large, but they've got many, many institutions that are feeding them images. Those are the sorts of institutions that probably find the most benefit in terms of the number of capabilities we offer. And really the reason for that is nobody else does. Nobody else can do what we're doing in terms of having as many options available just through an internet connection. And while it might seem almost counterintuitive that large hospitals are going to have a large IT infrastructure, they're going to have several people supporting their IT infrastructure, we can make all of that easier and either make it so you don't need as many people to support the IT infrastructure, or you can just do more with the people that you have. And that's typically the direction that people go. So the larger an institution gets, it seems the larger they get. So in other words, they just grow as they get bigger. And what that means is that you're going to have to increase the number of things you're doing. And if you can increase the number of things you're doing without increasing the number of people doing it, and you can make it easier and faster and more efficient for everybody, which is our specialty, that's going to be useful for any institution of any size, but especially large hospitals. Hope that answers the question. Can you integrate with other RIS and PACS if you were only wanting to add the MAMO module? Yes. You're bringing up another good point here. We actually have our own teams for HL7 and for migration of data. That's actually fairly unusual. While they probably don't tell you so, even some very large players in our industry have, they use third-party teams for integration in HL7. We do not. Everything is in-house here. And just in terms of what that means where the rubber meets the road, I talked a little bit about how you can access things like reprocessing HL7 messages. Without getting too deep into the weeds with that, I think it's very important to highlight that we have our own team for doing the HL7 integration to begin with, but then we make it easy for you on site to do the at least the troubleshooting of HL7 and other integrations with RIS and EHR, EMR. And our typical workflow, in fact, I'm just off the top of my head, I cannot think of a single instance where we were not integrating with EMR, some other RIS. We do this all the time, and we're very good at it. So we do offer just simple modules. For instance, like the question was specifically mammography module. If you wanted to use just our mammography capabilities, for example, and that's a good workflow because we are very fast. Nobody else offers what we do just for mammography, saving you the expense of $20,000 to $50,000 per workstation. You can use what you've got without having to upgrade anything. You can add these modules, and we can integrate them with what you've already got, including dedicated mammography systems. So if you've already got tens of thousands of dollars invested, there's no reason to scrap it. But if you wanted to add capabilities and remote reading capabilities in particular, then you can add our module, and we just simply integrate it. And that's a very quick and easy thing to do, and we've done it several times already. I should also point out that just the connection with Konica Minolta. Konica they've been at the top of customer satisfaction lists for quite some time, and they expect that we're going to hold up our end of that bargain as well. We have basically doubled the size of our support and product development teams in just the last few years. So all that I'm showing you now is very well supported behind the scenes in both implementations and service and the integration to begin with. The next question is there a noticeable bandwidth reduction with the server-side rendering? And of course, absolutely there is. As I think I mentioned early on, the average is 65%. The minimum is pretty much 50%, but we've actually seen higher bandwidth reduction in sites, particularly in cardiology and orthopedics, where the physicians are moving around a lot, and you don't necessarily know where they're going to be sitting or where they're going to want to show images to a patient. In those cases, many institutions send the same DICOM file, which in the case of echocardiography can be gigabytes. They send the same file to different workstations because they don't know for sure where the physician's going to be sitting, and they want to make sure that it's available for instant viewing wherever they go. So the server-side rendering, and maybe I didn't spend enough time discussing that eliminates entirely the need for pushing the same file more than once, ever. Because the only time you're going to be actually seeing an image on a screen is when you open the study, you double-click on a study here, and that's when it initiates the launch. It sends a message to our server to load up this study, render it on the server, and send me back the pixels. So I'm not getting that whole DICOM file. The DICOM file is still on the server. I don't need to see that. And even when it comes to the priors that are associated with it, even if it's a different modality, it doesn't matter if it's ultrasound, or in this case, I've got a CT that I might want to look at the same time. I don't have to do any prefetching. There's no caching on the local box that needs to happen before I click and load the study. It's right there immediately. So even multiple studies. This is a patient that has multiple exams over years, different modalities. I have access to all of that instantly, and that the front end bandwidth reduction is the server side rendering. But the workflow bandwidth reduction can also be equally impressive since you don't have to send the same study more than once. Any other questions? Let's see, what facilities do I feel benefit most from Exa? Well, I'm going to give you a biased answer. Everybody does. But that bias is actually based on fact. We do see, that the people who get our system benefit because we're offering something nobody else does. And just to clarify that, I'm going to log in as somebody else just for a second here. And what I'm going to show you is what like a full system administrator would see. So if I'm going to log in with more rights, in other words, and I'm going to give you just a little bit of an idea about how much we can expand a single institution's efficiency by having a single database system with a bunch of different functions. We do have a billing module. We've got scheduling functions. We can integrate everything on that workflow diagram I showed you before, from when a doctor digitally enters an order and signs it online to when the report is sent out and incorporated in EHR. So we can cover that whole workflow all on the system on the same database with the same speed and functionality I showed you before. And so, the billing module, the scheduling module, the different functions for mammography, different modalities, all of that's built in onto the same database. So whether you get all of these functions or whether you pick and choose and look at this something like an a la carte menu, anybody who gets these, who buys Exa, is getting the server-side rendering, zero footprint, and the workflow engine with the dashboarding and reporting that goes along with it. So the dashboards and reporting, that's something that maybe I'm just going to show you a little bit more about that, because that is an important function that you just can't do on a system with different databases. For instance, when I'm looking at specific workflows, I want to see how long it takes from the time an order is entered by the to when I get a report, or when a patient hits my office to when I get a signed report. If you don't have the same database, you're going to have to be querying across different databases and extracting data, and probably putting things together in Excel to get the kind of data we can get automatically just from our single database. So the kind of institutions, if you're talking about what facilities do I think benefit most, it's those that are looking to combine the functions of a single database system with speed and workflow efficiency. And that gets back to that workflow diagram that I showed you before that's entirely unique to us. Nobody else has anything like this workflow engine. And it's an extremely powerful way to look at studies. Most systems will have some kind of customizable status. They can probably color code it. They might be able to assign some functions to it in specific ways. But nobody else has anything like this, where we can, we can train somebody on site to manage how this system works with actions that can be automatically set up. I can change the behavior of the system, which also changes right-click options. Nobody else has anything like this. And even just this thing, as cartoony as it might look, this really does speed up workflow dramatically, even from other PACS systems that have customizable status to some degree. They don't have this kind of power. They just don't. So anybody from a small office to a large institution will get some benefits. But I think, as I mentioned before, it's really, the more you use that single database system, the more benefit you get out of it. Any other questions? Are there any companies we're unable to have difficulty integrating with? Well, the honest answer is, we're never the slow one when it comes to something like HL7 integration. And EHRs are very complicated beasts, and I don't want to make it sound like we pick on any single company, because we're happy to work with anybody, and we enjoy working with multiple vendors. We're very agnostic about who's sending us images and where we're sending our images. We're very happy to work with anybody. But as you know, EHRs, EMRs are very complicated beasts just by their nature. And so when we're doing new projects, the slowest part is generally the getting all of the hooks and stuff ready with the EHR, and it's not just our side. It's harder for them to do. So, you know, this difficulty is a relative term, but we take images from all modalities. It doesn't even have to be DICOM. We have several capabilities for importing studies that are, in fact, proprietary. So if I wanted to, I'm going to drag over a screen here. If I wanted to bring in proprietary images that not DICOM at all, if I wanted to modify the demographics and overwrite the DICOM header on the way in, I can take advantage of the fact that our system doesn't care about what kind of images we get, you know, where we're getting our data, but I can also match it up to the database on importation and overwrite the DICOM header as it comes in, which makes it a prior as soon as it hits the server. These functions are related to that same idea that this is a workflow system that increases speed and efficiency across all manufacturers, across all different kinds of workflows, and across different institutions, since it's often the case that we're going to get a disk, perhaps, from some other manufacturer than we're used to seeing in the hospital, and that it's going to have a different patient ID scheme, and I can make it match up to what's already in the database as I import it. So that makes those kind of tools, because we've been making PACS for many years, and we've been working with third parties for all of those many years. We have tuned our workflow exactly for that cooperation and sort of vendor-neutral approach to archiving and storing data. Any other questions? Do customers see any cost savings when switching to Exa? Yes, I'm a product development guy, so I don't generally get into numbers, but I can be very, I've not yet seen a case where cost wasn't one of the big considerations in buying a system. And while I'd like to talk about the things that I have to do with with the product development and how I think this is a very special system and it's very powerful and fast and does all of this, cost is a big deal. And there hasn't yet been a site where part of our offering was not a cost saving. And that cost savings sometimes comes down to the workflow saving. So we're not always the very cheapest in every case we go into. And in fact, that's usually not the case. That if in a small hospital, there are cheaper options, or a small office. There are times we still even sell a previous platform if cost is a major consideration and they can't handle all of the, they don't require all of the functionality we offer. But even in small institutions, we found that even in cases of orthopedics offices, where we offer things like an attorney portal, which allows them to do the fairly lucrative work with attorneys very efficiently, that saves them money. So even if they have to spend a little bit more on Exa to get the extra functionality that we offer, we always end up saving them time, which saves them money, and we save physicians time, which is very expensive. So, if you're looking to see where the big costs are incurred, it's always going to be in how much you have to pay to your IT support people, how much time, how much physician time is worth, how much just the speed through the network, how much network bogging down, how much that costs you. All of that ends up being a fairly significant cost savings. And so far, we've always demonstrated that we can reduce costs as well as increase the satisfaction by improved workflow. Hope that answers the question. Any other questions? while I'm at it, I should probably just mention that we do have, I didn't get into some of the details. We, of course, do the CD burning, even though that is becoming less important because we do offer patient and referring physician portals where you don't have to burn a CD. You can just give someone a user login, and they have access to their data, so that we can usually avoid burning CDs, but we do offer that. So if you wanted to burn images or even several studies to a thumb drive or a DVD or a shared folder on a network, we do, of course, offer that. And, you know, the usual workflow that you would expect out of a PACS, merging and splitting studies, all of that's available. And as far as, you know, like the right-click options, this is user customizable, and I've logged in as an administrator. So the, this does have a lot of options on the screen that a physician probably wouldn't want to see. But we do have all of the usual functions that you would expect, and then some when it comes to the user interface on the PAC. The next question is, are the dashboard analytics customizable per user? Yes, everything on the system is customizable by user. The dashboards in Keen particular, this is where a lot of people have particular needs that they want to look at real time. So in other words, I think you'll see that, you know, when I logged in as the other user, I had different graphs. They looked different. I was looking at different time slices and different data. Everybody's going to see something different. If I logged in as a physician, I would probably just see things like, things to do today, calendar, institution-wide alerts or notifications. If I'm an IT support person, I would probably be more interested in things like CPU. But even from just what we offer as the base gadgets to add in, these can be customized. We use PostgreSQL on the back end, which makes it pretty easy for us to customize queries. So if you have any, you know, particular, even sort of odd request for things to look at, we've probably already run into it, and it's fairly easy for us to create that. But not everybody's going to want to see all of the gadgets, so we have made it customizable. And even within a user, I can change my mind and move things around and change the gadgets that I have displayed here, or add things in as I need to. So yes, very highly customizable per user, but that applies to pretty much everything within the system. That's even different views for the schedule book, different options for the work list, for the viewer. You know, the viewer itself has a lot of user customization available. So if I'm looking at just the, just the viewer itself, I'm going to just open up a random study here and just show you some of the things that are available and customizable. We can, of course, set up hanging protocols that can be in whatever sort of format you want. But by default, we have certain tools that are customizable at the top. You can decide which tools you want to have here. We can also have these, toolbars on the sides, bottom, top of the images, and then, right-click options and keyboard options. So if I wanted to just hit the M button for a measurement, I can do that, for instance. So all of those things are per user. And that's, reporting, analytics, all of that is customizable by institution and by user. Any other questions? Here's a good question. Is there a specific workstation I need? I'm glad you got this one, because this is fairly important to understand. We do require a stout server. The server has to meet our specifications because we're doing a lot on the server. But because we do server-side rendering, I'm not doing very much on my local workstation at all. In other words, when I bring up this list, when I bring up a study, I double-click on one of these enormous studies, I'm not really expecting my local box to do very much at all. In most PAC systems, all of them that are not server-side rendered, zero footprint, if I double-click on a study that's got hundreds of images in it, I not only have to download that whole study, but I have to have the local CPU, the memory on this local box, has to render that image from the DICOM. And each one of these slices has to be rendered and displayed in real time as you're doing this. So for most systems, you need to have a pretty powerful workstation. With our system, I could theoretically be doing this on a Chromebook as long as I have decent monitors to look at this. So in the case of mammography, you need a workstation that is capable of driving the 5-megapixel monitors. And in the case of echocardiography, you do need, to make them autoplay quickly and so on. You do need to have a fairly robust system, but probably nothing that you don't already have. So the case, in this case, I'm just using an ordinary laptop. There's nothing special about the system I'm showing you all these functions on. So even when it comes to something like echocardiography, which is very demanding on a system, and you're probably seeing, even through the GoToMeeting, it can't display the motion of an echo very well at all. There's always going to be kind of jerky playback and so on, just because of GoToMeeting. But if I were to give you a login, and you were to see that the most demanding kinds of images are very undemanding on your local workstation, that means when you're doing upgrades or when you're considering a new system, you don't need to upgrade all of your machines. You basically are putting in a stout server, which is not exotic. It just has to meet our specifications. But you're only going to be updating the server. You're only going to be in any way touching the server where there's any updates or other needs required. The local boxes are almost analogous to the old dumb terminal idea, where the mainframe computer in old days would do all of the work, and you would have just a terminal like a monitor with a keyboard that just displayed the pixels. That's basically what we're doing here, where all of the work that's required for image analysis and even reporting and so on, all of that's done on the server, and we're very undemanding on a local workstation. And this, for mammography, has been that's been a very big deal. Those of you who have done upgrades on mammography system know that those local workstations are extremely expensive. You don't need to change anything with us. You can use a much more pedestrian workstation as long as you've got an extra 5-megapixel monitor laying around and you've got a video card capable of driving a couple of monitors and 5 megapixel at that. That's really all you need. Where we use much, 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 much less memory and processing power than other systems do. So that's a very good question. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for attending. It looks like we're coming right up to the top of the hour, so the timing was good. And we are always available for answering questions. If you have any more questions, if you'd like to get another more in-depth demo of our system, just let us know and we'd be happy to do it.